And there we are, right on time. Amazing. I need a haircut, guys. We live in the White Mountains. Not too many barbers around here. Need a shave, too. How are you guys? Everybody in chat seems to be having a great time. What do they call them? Emoticons? The emojis flying all over the place in there. It's fantastic. Anyway, we've been outside working in the yard, so I didn't have time to shave today or to look properly attired. I hope you'll excuse my look. So give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can see and hear me. Let's start with that. Looks like we're doing okay. Yep. Okay, we're doing great. Thanks. Patch Acres, Mr. Wilson says. We have Patch Airlines. Now we have Patch Acres. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Very good. Well, there is an awful lot to cover. I'm kind of thinking that this week we might put the big umbrella of quantum. We might call this Quantum Week. The reason that I want to do that is twofold. One, we have new patrons all the time, and I want to bring them up to speed with regards to the world of quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. One of our patrons sent me an article earlier today about a single atom quantum engine and refrigerator. I think I'm going to hold that until Technical Thursday, when we tend to go really deep into the nuts and bolts. But that's what prompted me to think, well, perhaps we need to do a little bit of review on quantum computing, specifically about D-Wave. I don't often talk about D-Wave because it has not been since February of last year when they came out with a press release regarding their 5,000 qubit quantum computer that was, at that time in February of last year, slated to be released in June of 2020. So we're coming up on that very quickly. And so I would like to both review historically, but also go forward and give you the heads up, give you not so much a warning that the computer's coming out, but why is it relevant to you and I? In other words, what's the punchline? So I'll give you the punchline right up front for this entire week. And then we will backfill today, Wednesday, and Thursday regarding quantum computing and artificial intelligence. The punchline is this. Lots of people are focused on the virus, the quarantine, and the economy, including yours truly. While in the background, we have continuing advancements within the world of artificial intelligence, something that Elon Musk has stated is the greatest existential threat to humanity. Again, his problem, reaction, solution, brain-computer interface, the neural link, which we've covered extensively. But in the face of that development of AI, we need to understand what is driving it to the highest level, the peak of AI, which is artificial general intelligence, AGI. Again, we've mentioned this many times. We've published it in Untitled magazine over the years, artificial general intelligence. We started in June of 2017 with Untitled magazine, and again, June is our 3-year anniversary, and we're putting together a compilation, a coalescence of information. But we started with D-Wave, and we started with CERN. So I think it's only fitting that as I bring us to the 3rd year anniversary, that we once again revisit artificial general intelligence, AI in general itself, and really what is not well understood, well appreciated and very little publicity in terms of mainstream or even scientific publications. Much attention is paid to quantum computing, which is really what was developed concurrently with the thawing of the AI, artificial intelligence winter, as it was called in the computer science world. AI had come and gone over the years in terms of its popularity within academia and private sector research laboratories. But it was not until ARPA, the predecessor to DARPA, decided in 1994, 1995 that they needed to revisit AI and thaw the AI winter, as it was called. In other words, there was very little funding that was being provided for research into artificial intelligence. But concurrently, monies being directed to thaw the AI winter were monies directed towards the development of quantum computing. Again, 1994-95. Along comes D-Wave. 1999 is provided $10 million by DARPA of seed money to develop quantum computing. And again, what is seldom appreciated, and you can speak to computer scientists, you can speak to folks that are involved in machine learning and artificial intelligence, the higher level of machine learning, and very few will acknowledge that quantum computing in general has been developed for the advancement and now the parabolic acceleration of AI, to the extent that people like Elon Musk and many others are warning that without humans keeping pace with artificial intelligence, without some mechanism, be that a piece of technology as Elon Musk is advancing, or ethical controls and constraints placed on the development and the application of artificial intelligence, AI, in that truly dystopian perspective of AI, will in fact become the greatest existential threat to humanity from the technology side. Now, I've been saying for weeks now that the greatest existential threat to humanity is the mark of the beast. So how does AI fit into the mark of the beast? We've talked about the medical side, we've talked about the biological, the DNA side, we've talked about the microneedle arrays. But along comes quantum computing. Because quantum computing is a key component of the mark of the beast. You know, I announced about 2 months ago that all of the major scientific disciplines and all of the information that we've been talking about now for 3 years through Untitled magazine and through the live streams, and all of the information that I've been presenting since January of 2013 when I first went public, is all coalescing, all being focused, all being applied to the mark of the beast. And quantum computing is, I would say, I would put it this way: behind the DNA modification, behind the development of a man-made DNA-derived RNA, messenger RNA, as we talked about in the last live stream, mRNA, messenger RNA, developed vaccine, behind all of that development, there is no larger scientific topic, no topic that is all-encompassing beyond quantum computing, We can talk about particle physics, we can talk about quantum mechanics, but really, to make it relevant to our everyday walk of life, what's in it for me? Answering that question is quantum computing. Because it takes particle physics, it even takes things like CERN, a particle collider, and applies it to a tangible machine. And again, I want to underscore, before we go to our scripture for the evening, what is underpinning artificial intelligence is quantum mechanics applied into quantum computing. It isn't necessary to understand all of the technicalities of quantum computing, and I most often focus on the development of quantum computing with D-Wave systems. We know, of course, that Google and IBM and others are developing their own, and Rigetti, developing their own quantum computers, commercial devices. But the real leader in all of this has been D-Wave. As I said, back in 1999, early 2000, they were receiving monies from DARPA, $10 million, and then they received $20 million in private sector venture capital. And Jeff Bezos was one of what are known in the venture capital world. He is known as an angel investor. And he was one of the early angel investors in D-Wave. Okay? So there are implications and ramifications to just that, which we've covered in the magazine before. But it is absolutely imperative that we understand the applications of AI. We have covered in the past how AI learns by observing human behavior. That was the early beginning points of modern AI, which I will call from the year 2000 forward, because in a parallel timeline, a parallel developmental track is D-Wave's quantum computer and artificial intelligence. Again, underscoring that whenever you're talking about the highest level applications of AI, which is what we're going to delve into this evening, those applications are developed utilizing D-Wave quantum computing. That's the primary, not the sole, but the primary purpose of their computers is to advance AI. So what are the applications for this high level? Well, one of the primary is medicine. And within that category of medicine, we're talking about DNA research. And you can extrapolate where I'm going with this. When we're talking about a virus that has been released that is clearly, not just from me, but from many scientific sources, knowledgeable about the development of biological weapons, the weaponization of DNA, have said that this is clearly a man-made virus. It is clearly evident to me, because quantum computing has been developed not just for medicine, but for metallurgy, for the development of nuclear weapons systems, a whole host of things. But one of its primary and often cited as benevolent applications of quantum computing is in healthcare. It's clearly evident to me that quantum computing is behind the man-made construct that has resulted in this virus. And also, before the virus was released, I'm quite confident that a vaccine already existed before its release. So what's in it for you and I is the fact that quantum computing is driving medicine, specifically driving genetic modification, systems of DNA and RNA modification. Even a rudimentary level of searching on the internet, you will find that quantum computing, specifically D-waves, their primary application is in the world of medicine and DNA research. Am I saying that they are part and parcel and behind this virus? No, I am not saying I have a smoking gun that will put their name to this virus. So I am not saying that. But I am saying that quantum computing in general has always been developed first and foremost for the application in the sector of medical research. I revealed about 2.5 years ago that D-Wave sold one of their computers to China for their quantum computing lab. Now, they're a Canadian company. The United States government doesn't have any control over who Canada is allowing to sell technology to other countries, to foreign states. But you know, the United States does have a friendly relationship with Canada, and you would think that the U.S. government would apply pressure to restrict the sale through D-Wave of Burnaby, British Columbia in Canada, the sale of that technology to the Chinese. But that technology transfer took place, again, about 2.5 years ago. Every customer of D-Wave that receives what they call an on-premise installation, in other words, there's a physical computer on their premises, receives the future generation upgrades. The most current quantum computer from D-Wave is the 2000Q. It's 2048 qubits. That was 1,000-fold increase in computing power over their previous generation, which was the 1000 model, which is actually a 1024 qubits machine. As I said, in June of this year, they're supposed to release their 5000 qubit, which is actually going to be about 5065 qubits, but that's kind of parsing things. The point here is that the Chinese, as I'm targeting right now, but there's also Los Alamos National Laboratory, the NSA, who we're going to talk about this evening, Volkswagen, Google, Amazon, all own physical D-Wave quantum computers, and the Chinese will be receiving the Pegasus quantum chip, qubit chipset, the 5000 model. They will be receiving theirs, their upgrade. Los Alamos National Laboratory took delivery of, well, didn't take delivery, but they were the first one to purchase, publicly to purchase, and that was last year that they purchased the 5000 model. So if any of you have heard of D-Wave and you're kind of new to these live streams, and you may have heard reports that, well, it isn't really proven technology, that it's still in its infancy. Well, it depends on your perspective, but yes, it is in its infancy, but no, it's not in its infancy. When you look at their customer list, if you go to D-Wave Systems, they have all their customers listed there. These are national laboratories here in the United States. Intelligence community, and now foreign national entity in China. And we're not on the greatest footing with China these days. It begs the question, why did one of our closest allies, Canada, allow the sale of that computer to China? And as a very wide end run, if you might take a football analogy, a very wide end run on this discussion, it's possible that this virus, being a man-made construct, was helped along by a D-Wave quantum computer. I have no proof to that. I'm saying it's only possible. But again, that's what makes it relevant to you and I. It has an everyday impact on us. We're living it right now, that impact, in the form of the quarantine and the economic impact. But let's take it, just before we go to Scripture, let's take the impact to the mark of the beast, where, from my perspective, all of science is coalescing down to and being applied directly. If you take all of the components of the mark of the beast, the microneedle array delivery system, and the quantum dots, if you look at all of the components that go into not only making up the delivery system and the components of the mark of the beast itself, but what the mark of the beast is connected to. In the big picture, that discussion has been the blockchain infrastructure of the beast system. But over the years, you've heard me talk about the Sentient World Simulation, SWS. It's a product of Purdue University, which has been live since 2007. We're going to refer to that when I talk about the NSA tonight. Remember, Sentient World Simulation. That's driven by quantum computing. Remember, NSA was behind the DARPA funding, initial $10 million of D-Wave. Remember those points as we go into what we're going to discuss this evening. I'm connecting some significant and major dots for you, not for the purpose of sensationalism, but to illustrate what the mark of the beast is connecting to, beyond just saying it's blockchain, okay? Let's drill deeper. Let's look at the details of what it's connecting to. Because every single area of science applies to the mark of the beast, its development, and its connection and distribution and control of the human race. Elon Musk wants to say that AI is the greatest existential threat to mankind. Well, let's take it a step further than that, because as far as I know, Mr. Musk is not a child of God. He is not a born-again Christian, so to speak. He is not a believer. Quite to the contrary, from my observations. Therefore, we'll take it beyond what Elon Musk is saying, and we will say that the greatest existential threat to mankind is the mark of the beast, because through free will, willingly making the decision, knowing that it's the mark of the beast, a person's soul is then damned to perdition for all of eternity. Doesn't get much bigger than that. Okay? AI is but a delivery system for the mark of the beast. It is but a control system connected to the mark of the beast. This is why we need to examine it. AI is the control system for the Antichrist. It is developed and promoted and implemented by the Antichrist spirit. AI clearly is a system from Satan himself. Now, there are computer scientists out there that will listen to this and say that that's just pure nonsense to say that it is from Satan. But God didn't create artificial intelligence. There's no reason for it. The applications of artificial intelligence have no place in Scripture. Nowhere to be found. No reason for it to exist. No reason to be promoted as something that is going to exceed the capabilities, all capabilities of a human. That doesn't come from God. That's a corruption. That's a corruption of what God created. Therefore, if it's not from God, then it's from hell. It's from Satan. So, any of you computer scientists out there and people that are knowledgeable about computing and software and hardware, think long and hard. Think about all our discussions of geomancy, a dark forbidden art, one of the dark forbidden mantic arts, which is at the heart of all computing. And we've made that case very clear over the years. And AI is but a computer program. It is a series of computer algorithms. AI has no place, no benevolent place within the world of God's creation. None whatsoever. Let's go to Scripture. Again, very familiar, but based on my opening monologue right there, which took about 30 minutes to deliver, Proverbs 25 verses 2 and 3 takes on greater significance. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and the glory of kings to search it out. As the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings cannot be searched. As I read through that, I'm thinking kings, presidents, President Trump. You know, perhaps in the time in which the scriptures were written, perhaps in the time of Jesus, there was a time, I mean, this is Solomon, okay? The time of Solomon. Perhaps there were benevolent kings. Perhaps there were kings that were trying to search out the mysteries of God. Perhaps there were kings that were trying to work in concert with God. But I find it difficult to think of presidents and kings and queens today as being at all in alignment with God. We know that we are supposed to give respect to our leaders, such as presidents, because they are appointed by God. That in God's mind and His greater plan, that we don't really have the ability to understand, presidents like Donald Trump and others around the world, and dictators and queens and kings, they serve God's purpose. We may not understand it, but they serve His purpose in the greater scheme, the greater plan of what He's doing, and we know that. We don't necessarily have to like them, but we do have to bear in mind that God put them in those positions. But we might replace the word king or kings with ourselves. I know I'm taking liberties with Scripture, but in a way, in a form of interpretation, we are seeking out God. We are seeking the mind of God. We are seeking that which God conceals. And through prayer, by way of the Holy Spirit, He's been increasing knowledge, just as He said in Scripture. Knowledge would increase in the latter days, and certainly our knowledge has been increasing by leaps and bounds. And if we are focused on Him, He will reveal more to us. He will give us that which He knows we can handle and no more. And you know that. But if we are genuinely seeking not only His leading, but His explanation, so that it leads to a greater understanding of what's going on in the world, for us individually, a greater understanding, He will reveal it. You know, in the last live stream, I was asking patrons what topics we should try to coalesce into an introductory video, and I thank you all for your emails that you have sent. And I think where it does kind of coalesce together is, number one is salvation. Okay? The message taking all of the 3 years of live streams and bringing them together. It has to start with salvation, our personal relationship with our Creator and with Jesus Christ. Okay? So that's easy, but it isn't easy. I think you know what I mean. We get my D-Wave notes ready here. It's salvation. It has to start with the Holy Spirit side. It has to start with salvation as we begin to try to pull together an introductory video that Doug and I will try to bring many of these live streams together under. And then the other, of course, is the mark of the beast. Because, as I said, so much of the technology, virtually all technology, has a relevant integration into the mark of the beast and what it connects out to. Okay? So salvation and the mark of the beast, that's where we're headed with putting together this video. I don't know how much is going to be discussed about the advancements in AI over the next few weeks and the next few months by others. But I'm paying close attention to it. Again, this whole quarantine and economic impact has served the purpose of distracting a lot of people, including myself, away from what's going on with artificial intelligence. If someone like Elon Musk, who is speaking from a spiritual perspective, when he calls it the greatest existential threat to the human race, he knows that it's literally a threat. That's what's in it for you and I. It's literally is a threat. If we want to know more about artificial intelligence, we start with God. We start with prayer, and He will increase our knowledge and our understanding. He does that to take away the fear. Elon Musk is putting the fear out there because he's trying to sell his device as a solution, his Neuralink. What God is more than happy, more than willing to do, is to take away the fear by increasing our knowledge and our understanding of what the enemy is putting out there. The enemy's weapon system, the enemy's control systems through technology. And more than happy to reveal to us about the mark of the beast, its components, its delivery system, what it's connected to. If you want to know, seek it out through prayer, and it will be revealed to you. The more knowledge that you and I have, the greater the understanding we have about the enemy, the less fear that can be generated by the enemy. You see, the primary modus operandi is beyond problem, reaction, solution, which is what the humans are doing that are trying to control other humans. But the primary modus operandi of the enemy, meaning Satan himself, is fear. Knowledge dilutes, diminishes, and destroys fear. You know, we've heard the trite phrase, ignorance is bliss. Well, let's do a 180 on that one. Ignorance is fear. It's not bliss, it generates fear. And you can see that with people around you who don't understand what's going on right now in the world. But you have a greater understanding of what's going on because you understand the science behind it. You understand the technology. You understand the people that are pushing those technologies. And so you're not as fearful about it. In fact, through your faith, you can diminish that fear to practically zero. As I like to say, take a pragmatic approach to this. Take your prudent steps in preparing and protecting, but be pragmatic about it. And I mean pragmatic because you know God's in control of all this. You know it's all part of his plan. Just like the kings and queens and presidents, even dictators are allowed to operate. They are put in place by God himself under his plan. Well, this whole virus and quarantine and all of this is part of his plan. We don't always understand the whole picture. We don't understand all of the moving parts of God's plan, but we know in general that this is all under his control. So pragmatically, we shouldn't have any fear at all. But it helps us as humans with our puny little human brains to diminish the fear if we know the mechanisms and we know who's developing and who's pushing the mechanisms. That's why we spend so much time talking about science and technology here. Okay? Now, we're going to get into D-Wave, we're going to get into the NSA, but there was a patent that was sent to me before I went on the air. I'm not going to mention his name unless he tells me in the chat room it's okay to mention his name, but he's in the chat room and I want to thank you for sending this to me. And this is the excerpt. I'm just going to read this very quickly. This is from AT&T. It's a patent application entitled Routing Policies for Biological Hosts. I'll read that again. Routing Policies for Biological Hosts. And it describes the interface diagnostics between the brain, body, and external communications. Now, remember, what I'm saying is that all of technology is coalescing to the production of the mark of the beast, the delivery of the mark of the beast, and then the connection of the mark of the beast into the beast system itself. Bear that in mind as I read this to you. Figure 11, this is coming from the patent. Figure 11 is a schematic illustrating inter-host translation according to exemplary embodiments. The above paragraph explains how a biological host may have short-range intra-host networks. That is, the brain of any human or animal has the neurological area network, which can be addressable. using the neurological area network addresses that they illustrate. The biological host also has the body area network, which may be addressable. If any biological host has either of these intranet host networks, then communications may be sent between different biological hosts. Again, I'm reading from the patent application. That is, one person's neurological area network may communicate with a different person's neurological area network. Brain-to-brain communications. For example, your brain communicating to your cat's brain. Likewise, one person's body area network may communicate with the different person's body area network. Body to other body communications. Indeed, one person's neurological area network may communicate with a different person's body area network. As one person's intrahost networks are addressable, different people and animals may conduct interhost communications. In more simple terms, one person's brain may control another person's body and vice versa. Okay? Now, the person that sent this to me has a question. Is this how the red horse breaks out? There is mention in Revelation 6:4 and 6:8 that people will kill one another and the beasts of the earth will go crazy. The question being posed, is this because people's brains will be swapped with animal bodies and animal brains swapped into human bodies, even if temporarily? This is what this brain interface technology patent implies. Now, I have not read the patent in its entirety because literally he alerted me to it in the chat room as we were on the air. So I will read that before Wednesday, and then we'll go back to it on Wednesday and we will take it apart and we'll dissect this. But you know what? Just what we've read so far. Let me parenthetically give you something we know from Scripture. The days of Noah, biological, genetic modification, Nephilim, all of that. But we also know what was going on in the days of Noah, which is what we're in now. My parenthetical reference is back to D-Wave quantum computing. That patent was applied for, authored by AT&T, American Telephone and Telegraph. That's amazing, telegraph. Here's the deal. The present model D-Wave quantum computer uses a quantum chipset, a qubit chipset, and they give a name to each of their chipsets. The present one, its name is Chimera. Days of Noah. Mixing of animal and human DNA. Now we're talking about mixing brains, communicating brains, controlling the brains of an animal with a human brain, or an animal brain controlling or interfacing with a human brain. Quantum computing, Chimera, chipset. Quantum computing is straight out of the pit of hell. By their own admissions, they communicate with parallel dimensions. With the 2000 qubit computer, they are communicating, by their own statements, to over 2,000. It is the power of 2. Base 2. 2 to the 2,000th power of parallel dimensions, as they describe it, that they're communicating with. They're not parallel dimensions, those are entities. Those are spirits. This is interdimensional communication. How can I say that and say it succinctly? Geomancy, divination, prognostication, divining the future, amantic art. Amantic art is a divinatory tool. It is an interdimensional communication tool. Geomancy, we've presented the case for 3 years now, is at the heart of all computing, which includes quantum computing. When they talk about parallel dimensions, they're talking about communicating with fallen angels, with spirits, 2 to the 2,000th power, with a chipset that is called Chimera. Now the next one that's coming out in June, which is the 5,000 qubit, which will be 2 to the 5,000th power of parallel dimensions of entities that they're communicating with. And by their own statements, historically, they've said, if we are smart enough, if we are clever enough, we will be able to reach into those dimensions and extract resources from those dimensions. Longtime listeners, you guys have heard me say this 100 times, that same quote. And that results in what I call quantum pollution, which we won't elaborate on here. But they're extracting resources from other dimensions, is what they call it. No, they're just getting information, forbidden knowledge from fallen angels, plain and simple. That's the short version of the explanation. Again, trying to bring new patrons quickly up to speed if that's possible with the things that we've covered for 3 years. Their chipset, as I said, that they're presently using with the 2000Q model is Chimera. Think about that in relation to this patent. Now, the 5,000 qubit model, which will be 5,065 qubits, the chipset name is Pegasus, the winged horse, days of Noah, genetic modification, the virus that is going around right now that is genetically modified, Pegasus. Okay? Sure, mythological, but where do the mythos come from? Why would they use that? Why not come up with a number? Why not just call the chipset the 5,000? Why do they have to put these numbers to them? In the past, the chipsets have been called the Rainier, like Mount Rainier in Washington State, which is a volcano. Another one was called Vesuvius, another volcano. You cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. And they are blatantly, openly labeling their technology with spiritual names. Why? For those that are discerning, like you and I, for those of us that do our research, that bother to pay attention, we understand why they call it Chimera and Pegasus. Because it's the days of Noah. Because it's all spiritually derived technology. All of it is spiritually derived technology. So I want to thank the patron that sent me that patent. This is another shining example of what goes on in this Patreon community that we have, this group that we have here. You guys are extraordinarily intelligent, excellent researchers. You've got your fingers in pies that I don't even have access to, that I don't have knowledge of, and you send me this information, and then I try to bring it together and share it with the group of patrons. And we do release these live streams to the general public. And there's been a tremendous response just in the last few weeks, especially since, and again, I'm not going to mention the person's name, but our Swedish friend who was kind enough to put together the outline of the Mark of the Beast, and then a second version. And just today, I've sent out over 60 requests for those outlines. Those outlines have probably more than any other time in the last 3 years has generated a greater response for information from those videos of these live streams that eventually go out publicly, and people have just in droves, no exaggeration, in droves are asking for those outlines concerning the Mark of the Beast that we've discussed. And the outlines, they pull together the information from a variety of articles in Entangled magazine and live streams, not just a single live stream. And I'm happy to continue sending those out. This will eventually go out publicly, this live stream. And if people would like the Mark of the Beast outline, that's all you have to put in your subject line. Mark of the Beast outline, and I'll send it to you. Okay? Happy to do that, because this is what this is all about. Okay? It's all about salvation and the Mark of the Beast. We have to warn people. People will be making a free will decision, but they will not understand that it's the Mark of the Beast. Okay? It may, in fact, be labeled as the mark of the Antichrist that is being worshipped by the world. But that will only happen after the identity is made known of the Antichrist to the world. And then people are worshiping the Antichrist, and they will willingly take the mark of that Antichrist because they want to continue to participate in the beast system. And that's their free will. But what they're not understanding are the consequences to their soul. And that's what the purpose of the outlines regarding the Mark of the Beast is all about. And that's why I'm happy to send it to people. I think I'm not keeping an accurate score, but we're probably approaching 300 people that I've sent it out to now. I think that's a fair estimate. Almost 300 people, which is astounding considering I have a very small YouTube channel. It gets censored all the time and demonetized all the time. It's just ridiculous. I'm surprised that they even allow my channel to be on there anymore. Okay, and that's why we've always got all our plans, Doug and I, for moving this platform somewhere else. But getting off track. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, Mark of the Beast. Pegasus. That will be coming out in June. And Pegasus is driving the AI. And the single purpose for the AI is to control human minds, which is what will happen when people take the Mark of the Beast, their DNA is changed, they lose all awareness that they've even undergone a change, and their mind is literally connected to the sentient world simulation, to the beast system through the blockchain structure, the hive mind. This patent is speaking of that. I haven't even read the whole patent. Just what I've read there confirms what I've said to you for years about the Mark of the Beast. Why would a human need to communicate with an animal, and why would an animal need to communicate with a human? God didn't design us that way. Now, maybe with Adam and Eve, maybe when Adam was before the fall, he was in good standing with God. Maybe he had the ability. Maybe you guys can quote some scripture for me that illustrates that he was able to communicate with the animals. I'm not familiar with the scripture right now off the top of my head to say that I think he was, but I don't think God designed us in our present form to be communicating in the manner that this patent is talking about. Sure, we talk to our dogs, we talk to our cats, we talk to our pets. Our animals respond to our voice, they respond to our training. We're able to call to a dog by name and the dog will come to us once there's that repetition and that routine. But does a dog understand English? I don't think so, or any other spoken language. Why would a company, AT&T, develop such a device? What spurs and motivates that kind of development? Spiritual. Spiritual. There's no way to separate the two. Okay? So I'll get to that on Wednesday in more detail. Let's talk about the NSA. Yes, let's do that. I'm going to put up a graphic here. My lightning fast software. I'd like you to take a look at that as I read this to you. I'm going to give you the punchline right at the beginning here. I sent this to you prior to the, or I used it as the title for tonight's live stream. Pre-computed contact chaining. I'm sure many of you already, and I hope you pay attention to this, guys, in the chat room, okay? Let me say it again. Pre-computed contact chaining. Does that not remind you of contact tracing and the virus? Keep that in mind as I go through this very long article. I did not send you the article. I will send it to you after tonight's live stream, just to the patrons. Pre-computed contact chaining. I read this afternoon, and it takes a lot sometimes to surprise me anymore. But I found this article, and a whole group of pieces came together at one time. And again, they all coalesced at one time. You're going to hear in this article a lot of things that we've talked about in the past, but keep in mind the big takeaway here. Contact tracing. That's underway right now, okay? And the contact investigators, what we're calling, Kathleen and I are calling the new brown shirts, okay? This comes to us by way of Wired magazine, wired.com. The title, Inside the NSA's Secret Tool for Mapping Your Social Network. Edward Snowden revealed the agency's phone record tracking program. But thanks to pre-computed contact chaining, that database was much more powerful than anyone knew. Now, this is pretty long, so I will try to skip through it. Let me jump down to a couple of punchlines and then we'll backfill. just so you know where we're going with all of this. Okay. There are two programs that we're going to look at in this article. Two NSA programs. One I have pictured here. It's called Mainway. That's one word, Mainway. And associated with that is another program that it feeds information to. It's a database that is called Graph in Memory. Graph in Memory. Think of the graph as connecting the dots with lines. Okay, graph in memory. That's a pre-existing set of connections. What I'm going to give you right now is just to kind of leap forward a little. When they talk about graph in memory, they're talking about nodes, computer nodes. Each node represents a person. Each node is connected by a line. That's the graph, and that's pre-existing in the database memory. What they're describing here at the NSA is exactly what is contained in the Sentient world simulation that went live in 2007. There's a Purdue white paper published in 2006 that speaks to what is known as SEAS. That's the name of the program. If you type in SWS, Sentient World Simulation, Purdue University, 2006, the paper will come up. I published it in Untitled magazine back in 2017, okay? Graph in memory. Those are pre-existing connections between people. Pre-existing connections that were already entered into a database. Okay? The main program that we're talking about here is called Mainway. This is all about the Sentient World Simulation, folks, and this is all about contact tracing. So please bear with me. I know this is going to be long, but this is important that you see this because this is really pulling a lot together. The author of this article, his name is Barton Gellman. He wrote a book about Edward Snowden and the American surveillance state. Barton Gellman, Gellman. The title of his book, Dark Mirror. Dark Mirror. So this is his article. In the summer of 2013, I spent my days sifting through the most extensive archive of top secret files that had ever reached the hands of an American journalist. In a spectacular act of transgression against the National Security Agency, where he worked as a contractor, Edward Snowden had transmitted tens of thousands of classified documents to me, the columnist Glenn Greenwald, and the documentary filmmaker Laura Poitras. One of those documents, the first to be made public in June 2013, revealed that the NSA was tracking billions of telephone calls made by Americans inside the U.S. The program became notorious, but its full story has not been told. The first accounts revealed only bare bones. If you placed a call, whether local or international, the NSA stored the number you dialed, as well as the date, time, and duration of the call. It was domestic surveillance, plain and simple. When the story broke, the NSA discounted the intrusion on privacy. The agency collected, quote, only metadata, it said, not the content of telephone calls. Only on rare occasions, it said, did it search the records for links among terrorists. Now, This is the NSA that they're talking about. And in my opening monologue, I said that the intelligence agency primarily responsible for the seed money funneled through DARPA to D-Wave, a Canadian company, $10 million, 1999 and 2000, came from NSA, and they were the first recipients of the D-Wave quantum computer. At that time, it was the first commercial model was the 128 qubit quantum computer, NSA. Think about the capabilities from what I've told you over the years about combinatorial optimization, the operating system for D-Wave's quantum computers. Their ability to run a problem, to reach a solution that would take a classical supercomputer 10,000 years to compute, they can achieve in 15 seconds to 2 minutes, 200 seconds on occasion. Okay? 200 seconds versus 10,000 years in general. Okay? Just keep that sort of benchmark in mind as we go through this article. Because this article is talking about making connections without citing quantum computing. But the only way what I'm about to read to you can be accomplished can only be accomplished with a quantum computer. At lower levels, certainly supercomputers, classical transistor-based supercomputers can handle it. But when I read to you in a little bit the complexity that they're describing in here of connections, this graph in place, that can only be achieved by a quantum computer. So I'll continue here. I decided to delve more deeply. The public debate was missing important information. It occurred to me that I did not even know what the records looked like. At first, I imagined them in the form of a simple, if gargantuan, list. I assumed that the NSA cleaned up the list, date goes here, call duration there, and converted it to the agency's preferred, quote, atomic signet data format. Okay, signet is signals intelligence data format. Otherwise, I thought of the records as inert. During a conversation at the Aspen Security Forum that July, 6 weeks after Snowden's first disclosure, and 3 months after the Boston Marathon bombing, Admiral Dennis Blair, the former director of national intelligence, assured me that the records were, quote, stored untouched until the next Boston bomber came along. Okay, so what they're doing is they're saying here that all of the data that had been collected up until the time of the Boston Marathon bombing was metadata, and that it was sealed, it was untouched. Nobody was looking at it until there was another terrorist event, which he's saying until the next Boston bomber came along. In other words, until there was another significant terrorist event, none of that metadata, which the metadata, as you'll hear in this article, consists of connections between people, pre-existing, pre-computed, pre-stored connections between people. Again, think about contact tracing that's going on right now. I'll continue. Even by that account, the scale of collection brought to mind an evocative phrase from legal scholar Paul Ohm. Any information in sufficient volume, he wrote, amounted to a database of ruin. It held personal secrets that, if revealed, would cause more than embarrassment or shame. it would lead to serious, concrete, devastating harm. Nearly anyone in the developed world, he wrote, can be linked to at least one fact in a computer database that an adversary could use for blackmail, discrimination, harassment, or financial or identity theft. Revelations of past conduct, health, or family shame, for example, could cost a person their marriage, career, legal residence, or physical safety. Mere creation of a database, especially in secret, profoundly changed the balance of power between government and the governed. This was the dark mirror embodied, one side of the glass transparent and the other blacked out. If the power implications do not seem convincing, try inverting the relationship in your mind. What if a small group of citizens had secret access to the telephone logs and social networks of government officials? How might that privileged knowledge affect their power to shape events? How might their interactions change if they possessed the means to humiliate and destroy the careers of the persons in power? Capability matters, always, regardless of whether it is used. An unfired gun is no less lethal before it's drawn. In fact, in history, capabilities do not go unused in the long term. Chekhov's famous admonition to playwrights is apt only in drama, but in the lived experience of humankind. The gun on display in the first act, nuclear warheads, weaponized disease, Orwellian cameras tracing faces on every street, must be fired in the last. The latent power of new inventions, no matter how repellent at first, does not lie forever dormant in government armories. These could be cast as abstract concerns, but I thought them quite real. By September of that year, it dawned on me that there were also concrete questions that I had not sufficiently explored. Where in the innards of the NSA did the phone records live? What happened to them there? The Snowden archive did not answer those questions directly, but there were clues. I stumbled across the first clue later that month. I'd become interested in the NSA's internal conversation about bulk collection, the acquisition of high-volume data sets in their entirety. Phone records were one of several kinds. The agency had grown more and more adept, brilliantly creative, in fact, at finding and swallowing other people's information whole. Lately, the NSA had begun to see that it consumed too much to digest. Mid-level managers and engineers sounded notes of alarm in briefings, prepared for their chains of command. The cover page of one presentation asked, "Is it the end of the signal intelligence world as we have come to know it?" The authors tried for a jaunty tone, but had no sure answer. The surveillance infrastructure was laboring under serious strain. One name caught my eye on a chart that listed systems at highest risk. Mainway. I knew that one. NSA engineers had built Mainway in urgent haste after September 11th of 2001. Vice President Dick Cheney's office had drafted orders signed by President George W. Bush to do something the NSA had never done before. The assignment, forbidden by statute, was to track telephone calls made and received by Americans on American soil. The resulting operation was the lawless precursor of the broader one that I was looking at now. Mainway came to life alongside Stellar Wind, the domestic surveillance program created by Cheney in the first frantic weeks after Al-Qaeda flew passenger airplanes into the Pentagon and World Trade Center. Stellar Wind defined the operation. Mainway was a tool to carry it out. At the time, the NSA knew how to do this sort of thing with foreign telephone calls, but it did not have the machinery to do it at home. When NSA Director Mike Hayden received the execution order on October 4th, 2001 for the Vice President's special program, NSA engineers assembled a system from bare metal and borrowed code within a matter of days, a stupendous achievement under pressure. They commandeered 50 state-of-the-art computer servers from Dell, which were about to ship them to another customer, and lashed them into a quick and dirty but powerful cluster. Hayden cleared out space in a specially restricted wing of Ops 2B, an inner sanctum of the gleaming, mirrored headquarters complex at Fort Meade, Maryland. When the cluster expanded, incorporating some 200 machines, Mainway spilled into an annex in the Tordella supercomputer facility nearby. Trusted lieutenants began calling in a small group of analysts, programmers, and mathematicians on October 6th and 7th. On Columbus Day, October 8th, Hayden briefed them on their new jobs in a specially compartmented new operation. That day, he called it Starburst. The Stellar Wind cryptonym replaced it soon afterward. During the same holiday weekend, Hayden dispatched personnel from Special Source Operations to negotiate the secret purchase of telephone data in bulk from companies including AT&T and Verizon. The price would surpass $102 million in the coming 5 years. It was impossible to hide the hubbub from other NSA personnel who saw new equipment arriving under armed escort at a furious pace. But even among top clearance holders, hardly anyone knew what was going on. Stellar Wind was designated as ECI, Exceptionally Controlled Information, the most closely held classification of all. From his West Wing office, Cheney ordered that Stellar Wind be concealed from the judges of the FISA court and from members of the intelligence committees in Congress. Okay, let me just take a deep breath here and add a little something. I am going to read this whole article in its entirety. I hope you appreciate the impact of what is being revealed here. I'm surprised Wired magazine was even allowed to present this, but let me go beyond this article again. This folded in here, in between the lines of new equipment arriving, exceptionally controlled information, talking about, Dell servers being commandeered by the U.S. government. This is 2001 they're talking about, folks. This is when D-Wave was developing its prototype quantum computers. The year 2000, 2001, they were working with 8 qubits, 4 qubits, 8 qubits, 16 qubits. Eventually, the first model sold to the NSA was the 128 qubit model, as I mentioned. The NSA was driving D-Wave to develop their quantum computers because of what I'm describing to you right here in this article. That's what I wanted to add to this. I don't think Wired magazine would have been allowed to publish what I'm telling you right now. Let's go on. The author says, according to my sources and the documents I worked through in the fall of 2013, Mainway soon became the NSA's most important tool for mapping, listen to this, for mapping social networks. Okay? You want to know who's mapping all of the social network stuff? It's NSA's Mainway program. Okay, I'll continue. An anchor of what the agency called large access exploitation. Large is not an adjective in casual use at Ford Meade. Mainway was built for operations at stupendous scale. Other systems parsed the contents of intercepted communications, voice and video, email and chat text, attachments, pager messages, and so on. Mainway was queen of metadata, foreign and domestic, designed to find patterns that content did not reveal. Now I'm going to stop there. We have talked about for years about patterns, going all the way back to geomancy. Geomancy is all about patterns, pattern recognition, divination. The act of divination is interpreting patterns. Artificial intelligence is built on pattern recognition. Okay? That's what all the algorithms in all the levels of AI are built to recognize. Patterns. That's how AI comes up with decisions, through patterns. This is what quantum computers are designed to recognize. Patterns. Okay? It's what I published, I don't know, 18 months ago or whatever. There was an edition of Untitled magazine talking about the hidden golden nuggets in pattern recognition of data. Data golden nuggets. Finding those nuggets within the metadata, within the vast quantities of data. Finding those hidden patterns. That's what Quadrant, which is the business unit of D-Wave, Quadrant was set up to recognize in metadata patterns. If you look at the history of geomancy, if you look at going forward through geomancy, through the centuries, there's something called, with Aleister Crowley and others, Ramon Lull, something called the Great Table of the Earth. That is a table divided in 4 squares, 4 quadrants. That's why D-Wave's company is called Quadrant. The quadrant is for the overlaying of a spiral of data to recognize the hidden nuggets of patterns. This is what Mainway is doing. Okay? Let me change the graphic. I'll put myself back on camera here. Okay? This is a, I hope you're appreciating this, but to me, this is just one of the most significant articles I've read in years. Mainway is queen of metadata, foreign and domestic, designed to find patterns that content did not reveal. Beyond that, Mainway was a prototype for still more ambitious plans. Next generation systems, their planners wrote, could amplify the power of surveillance by moving from the more traditional analysis of what is collected to the analysis of what to collect. Okay? So traditional analysis was looking at what had already been collected, post-collection. Okay? Moving to the analysis of determining what to collect. Okay? Being more specific. Patterns gleaned from call records would identify targets in email or location databases and vice versa. Metadata was the key to the NSA's plan to identify, track, store, manipulate, and update relationships across all forms of intercepted content. I'm going to insert here for emphasis, folks. Virus contact tracing. Put that right in here. NSA's plan to identify, track, store, manipulate, and update relationships across all forms of intercepted content. An integrated map presented graphically. Okay, this is where graph in place comes in. An integrated map presented graphically would eventually allow the NSA to display nearly anyone's movements and communications on a global scale. All right, I'm going to stop right there where they're talking about this graph. This is the Sentient World simulation that I've presented to you since 2017 when it went live. I'll read it again. An integrated map. That's the Sentient World simulation. Do you know who the software company is that provided the software for the Sentient World simulation? Palantir. Do you know who is a third-party developer for D-Wave's cloud system they call Leap? Palantir was the very first third-party developer for cloud-based quantum computing offered by D-Wave. Palantir. Do you remember when there was that picture that I showed you and I published in Untitled magazine in Saudi Arabia when they were doing the ribbon cutting ceremony of their threat center, and they had the crystal ball, which is Palantir's trademark, the crystal ball, and there was Trump and the prince from Saudi Arabia. They were standing there with their hands over the crystal ball. Palantir software. That threat assessment center in Saudi Arabia is one component of the Sentient World simulation. So I'm adding these to this article of things that we have talked about. Okay? To allow the NSA to display nearly anyone's movements and communications on a global scale. That's what SWS does already. In their first mission statement, planners gave the project the unironic name, the Big Awesome Graph. Inevitably, it acquired a breezy acronym, the BAG. The crucial discovery on this subject turned up at the bottom right corner of a large network diagram prepared in 2012. A little box in that corner, reproduced below, finally answered my question about where the NSA stashed the telephone records that Blair and I talked about. The records lived in Mainway. The implications were startling. I shared that with you and just, it's been up there for a while, and I just pulled it down, the Mainway graph. The diagram as a whole, too large to display in full, traced a metadata flow sourced from billing records at AT&T as they wended through a maze of intermediate stops along the way to Fort Meade. Mail order, the last stop, was an electronic traffic cop, a file sorting and forwarding system. The ultimate destination was Mainway. The BRF partitions in the network diagram were named for business records FISA orders. Among them, a dozen signed in 2009 that poured the logs of hundreds of billions with a B, hundreds of billions of phone calls into Mainway. The first-time reader of network maps, Mainway's cylindrical icon might suggest a storage tank. It is not. The cylinder is a standard symbol for a database, an analytic service that runs on the hardware. So I'll go ahead and put that back up there, just because they're talking about it right now. Okay? Might as well have it up there. A storage tank. It's not. The cylinder is a standard symbol for a database, an analytic service that runs on the hardware. Mainway was not a container for data at rest. The NSA has names for those. They are called data marts and data warehouses. If the agency merely stored the U.S. telephone records, it would have left them in a system called Fascia 2, the Call Detail Record Warehouse, that feeds Mainway. Mainway's mission, laid out in its first fiscal year, was to enable NSA to dominate the global communications infrastructure and the targets that currently operate anonymously within it. The way the system accomplished that task had huge implications for American privacy. For reasons that will become apparent soon, I want to reproduce the entry for Mainway in the SSO dictionary, a classified NSA reference document. Mainway, or Mainway Pre-Computed Contact Chaining Service, is an analytic tool for contact chaining. It's helping analysts do target discovery by enabling them to quickly and easily navigate the increasing volumes of global communications metadata. Mainway attacks the volume problem of analyzing the global communications network. Now, what they're going to get to here in this article is that because of the volume of data, humans could not analyze the data. They couldn't find the hidden patterns. They couldn't discover the targets that they were after. So what they had to do was to develop preemptively, pre-existing, pre-standing, pre-computed contact chaining services. In other words, what they did was they took and I'll read the article, but I want to give you the punchline again. They took every communication, every person's phone call, whatever the communication was, email, doesn't matter, and they drew a line from that person to the person they were communicating with. And then that person that was number 2, where the line was drawn to, that number 2 person, who they were communicating, and so forth and so on. This is contact chaining. And now we see contact tracing underway with this virus. There were 3 noteworthy terms in that short passage: volume problem, contact chaining, and pre-computed. The last 2 in combination turned my understanding of the call records program upside down. Before we get to them, a note on the volume problem. The NSA had many volume problems, actually. Too much information moving too fast across global networks. Too much to ingest, too much to store, too much to retrieve through available pipes from distant collection points. Too much noise drowning too little signal. In the passage I just quoted, however, the volume problem referred to something else, something deeper inside the guts of the surveillance machine. It was the strain on an unbounded appetite on the NSA's digestive tract. collection systems were closing their jaws on more data than they could chew. Processing, not storage, was the problem. For a long time, intelligence officials explained away the call records database by quoting a remark from President Bush. It seems like to me that if somebody is talking to Al-Qaeda, we want to know why, he had said. In fact, that was not in all the way the NSA used the call records. I'm going to say that again. In fact, that was not at all the way the NSA used the call records. The program was designed to find out whether, not why, U.S. callers had some tie to a terrorist conspiracy. And to do so, it searched us all. Working through the FBI, the NSA assembled a 5-year inventory of phone calls from every account it could touch. Trillions of calls. Nothing like that was needed to find the numbers on a bad guy's telephone bill. This was where contact chaining came in. The phrase is used to describe a sophisticated form of analysis that looks for hidden, indirect relationships in very large data sets. Contact chaining began with a target telephone number, such as Boston bomber, and I can't pronounce his name, I apologize, Dehokar? I think it's a Russian name. Anyway, the Boston bomber that began with his telephone number and progressively widened the lens to ask whom his contacts were talking to and whom those people were talking to, and so on. Software tools map the call's records as nodes and edges on a grid so large that the human mind, unaided, could not encompass it. Nodes were dots on the map, each representing a telephone number. Edges were lines drawn between the nodes, each representing a call. A related tool called MapReduce condensed the trillions of data points into summary form that a human analyst could grasp. Now, I'm going to stop and add a little to this. Human analyst, replace that with AI analyst. Remember, AI and quantum computing back in 1995 through DARPA was put on the funding fast track for development. And by 2000, this is prior to 9/11 in 2001, in 2000, AI was taken out of its AI winter, meaning it was now being fully funded for research, and quantum computing was already developing its prototypes of 4-qubit, 8-qubit, 16-qubit, up to 128 qubits for the first commercial product. Okay? That is to deal with the situation that I'm just now describing to you. The nodes and the edges, the phone call and the connection between the two calling parties. AI replacing the human analyst to go through this metadata. This is the nodes and edges leading to 2006 with Purdue University coming up with a development of this called the Sentient World Simulation. Now you have the historical track record. Let's continue. Network theory called this map a social graph. It modeled the relationships and groups that defined each person's interaction with the world. The size of the graph grew exponentially as contact chaining progressed. The whole point of chaining was to push outward from a target's immediate contacts to the contacts of contacts, then contacts of contacts of contacts. Each step in that process was called a hop, H-O-P. Now, I'm adding again here, obviously, the word contact here, and now contact tracing with the virus, okay? This is all feeding more information of relationships and patterns of relationships into the NSA, folks, okay? Let's continue. Double a penny once a day and you reach $1 million in less than a month. That is what exponential growth looks like with a base of 2. Now, I'm going to add again. Remember, I said the number of qubits that the D-Wave quantum computer would add from generation to generation was factored on base 2 mathematics. 128, 1024, 2048, 4096, forward all the way base 2 multiplication, the number of qubits with each generation quantum computer. That's to deal with exponential growth of data, of contacts. This is why the NSA bought a D-Wave quantum computer. Why they funded the whole development of it is to deal with this exponential growth that I just read to you. As contact chaining steps through its hops, the social graph grows much faster. If the average person calls or is called by 10 other people a year, then each hop produces a 10-fold increase in the population of the NSA's contact map. Most of us talk on the phone with a lot more than 10 others. Whatever that number, dozens or hundreds, you multiply it by itself to measure the growth at each hop. Former NSA Deputy Director John Inglis testified to Congress in 2013 that NSA analysts typically go out 2 or 3 hops when they chain through the call database. For context, data scientists estimate decades ago that it would take no more than 6 hops to trace a path between any 2 people on Earth. Their finding made its way into popular culture in 6 Degrees of Separation, the play by John Guare, which subsequently was adapted into a film. 3 students at Albright College refashioned the film as a parlor game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. The game then inspired a website, the Oracle of Bacon, that calculates the shortest path from the Footloose star to any of his Hollywood peers. Okay? Bacon shared screen credits with a long list of actors. Those were his direct links, 1 hop from Bacon himself. Actors who'd never worked alongside him but appeared in a film with someone who had were 2 hops away from Bacon. Scarlett Johansson never worked with Bacon, but each of them had starred alongside Mickey Rourke, Bacon in Diner, and Johansson in Iron Man 2. 2 hops through Rourke connected them. If you kept on playing, you discovered that Bacon was seldom more than 2 hops away from any actor, however removed in time and movie style. In a single industry town like Hollywood, links like these might make intuitive sense. More surprising, if you did not spend much time around logarithms, excuse me, if you did not spend much time around logarithms, was the distance traveled by 1 or 2 hops through the vastly larger NSA dataset. Academic research suggested that an average of 3 hops, the same number Inglis mentioned, could trace a path between any 2 Americans. I'm going to put up the Pegasus chipset. This is D-Wave's Pegasus chipset that they're coming out with in June. This is developed for what we're talking about right now. Contact chaining on a scale as grand as a whole nation's phone records was a prodigious computational task, even for Midway. It called for mapping dots and clusters of calls as dense as a star field, each linked to others by webs of intricate lines. Mainway's analytic engine traced hidden paths across the map, looking for relationships that human analysts could not detect. I'm going to stop right there. Relationships that human analysts could not detect. That's why AI was developed through the NSA. Looking for relationships that human analysts could not detect. Forget about all the other discussions of artificial intelligence. This article is telling you exactly the origin, reason, and purpose for AI being funded, coming out of the AI winter, right here. Okay? Let me talk about Pegasus for a moment. The present quantum computer from D-Wave, its name is Chimera. It has 2,048 qubits. Okay? They are connected in such a pattern, in such a manner, that any singular qubit of the 2,048 in the Chimera chipset, one qubit is connected to 6 others. That's a neuromorphic relationship. That's similar to how our neurons are wired in our brains at a basic level. 1 to 6. One qubit is wired to 6 others. They call that the topology, the topographical or topological in mathematics, in quantum science. It's called topological. It's wiring diagram. Now we're looking at Pegasus. Rather than a 1 to 6 connection ratio, it's 1 to 15. Chimera was basically, if you want to think about like a topological map, okay? And you're looking at the terrain, the peaks and valleys. It was very two-dimensional in its 1 to 6 wiring pattern. What happens with Pegasus is it goes from 2 dimensions to 3. Its wiring is a 3-dimensional pattern, and now instead of 6 to 1, it's 15 to 1. Now, anybody who understands anything about computing, but especially quantum computing, should be astounded with what I just shared with you. This is similar to a chessboard, where you play on a flat 2-dimensional plane. And then like Spock on Star Trek, who played 3-dimensional chess. That's what Pegasus is, compared to a chessboard. Okay? So, the ability to find patterns, contact tracing, contact chaining on a scale as grand as a whole nation's phone records was a prodigious computational task, even for Mainway. Okay? I'm just being repetitive here. Let me jump down a little bit. Mainway had to produce that map on demand, under pressure of time, whenever its operators asked for a new contact chain. No one could predict the name or telephone number of the next Boston bomber. From a data scientist's point of view, the logical remedy was clear. if anyone could become an intelligence target, I'm going to read this again, okay? If anyone could become an intelligence target, in other words, that's kind of like Minority Report. If anyone could become an intelligence target, Mainway should try to get a head start on everyone. Now, this is, of all the stuff I've read to you so far in this article, this one sentence jumped off the page at me. This is a complete 180 on everything that has been said about the NSA, its metadata, and its gathering of intelligence from telephone records and emails and all the other stuff that we've heard about, okay? Everything we've heard about. We're now flipping 180 degrees around and we're showing what they were really doing. I'll read it again. If anyone could become an intelligence target, in other words, if you're prejudicing everyone that you're collecting data on, you're assuming that anybody could be an intelligence target, meaning there was a reason that they're targeted, whether they're a terrorist or just a person of interest or someone who was a dissident, somebody who's an anti-vaxxer, somebody who's blowing the whistle on D-Wave, somebody who's talking about all the things that we talk about here, could become an intelligence target. If anyone could become an intelligence target, Mainway should try to get a head start. That's the 180 right there. To get a head start on everyone. Okay? You have to establish those relationships, tag them, so that when you do launch the query, you can quickly get them. Rick Leggett, the former NSA deputy director, told me years later. Otherwise, you're taking like a month to scan through a gazillion line phone bill. And that right there was where pre-computation came in. Mainway chained through its database continuously, operating on a 24/7 basis, according to the classified project summary. You might compare its work on the most basic level to indexing a book, albeit a book with hundreds of millions of topics, phone numbers, and trillions of entries, phone calls. One flaw in this comparison is that it sounds like a job that will be finished eventually. Mainway's job never ended. It was trying to index a book in progress, forever incomplete. The FBI brought the NSA more than 1 billion new records a day from the telephone companies. Mainway had to purge another 1 billion a day to comply with the FISA court's 5-year limit on retention. Every change cascaded through the social graph, redrawing the map and obliging Mainway to update ceaselessly. Mainway's purpose, in other words, was neither storage nor preparation of a simple list. Constant, complex, and demanding operations fed another database called the graph in memory. When the Boston Marathon bombs exploded in April 2013, the graph in memory was ready. Absent unlucky data gaps, it already held a summary map of the contacts revealed by the Boston bombers' brothers' calls. The underlying details, dates, times, durations, busy signals, missed calls, and call waiting events were easily retrieved on demand. Mainway had already processed them. With the first hop pre-computed, the graph in memory could make much quicker work of the second and the third hop. To keep a graph at the ready, a Boston bomber graph at the ready, Mainway also had to pre-compute a graph for everyone else. If Mainway had your phone records, it also held a rough and ready diagram of your business and personal life. As I parsed the documents and interviewed sources in the fall of 2013, the implications finally sank in. The NSA had built a live, ever-updating social graph of the United States. Our phone records were not in cold storage. They did not sit untouched. They were arranged in a one-hop contact chain of each to all. All kinds of secrets, social, medical, political, professional, were pre-computed 24/7. Leggett told me he saw no cause for concern because the links were unassembled until you launch a query. I saw a database that was pre-configured to map anyone's life at the touch of a button. Okay. I am going to skip down a little bit from his conclusions and get back on camera here. Look at this quantum computer chipset. This is how you take billions and trillions of phone calls and contacts and lines connecting, what they call edges, connecting the dots, the nodes. I've said for years the sentient world simulation represents every single person on the planet as a node. And there it is, right there in that NSA article. Here's the computer that's coming out in June of this year. Pegasus. Three-dimensional chess. One qubit connected to 15 others instead of 1 to 6. The 2000 model with 1 to 6 connections was a 1,000-fold increase in computational capability over the 1000 model that preceded it, which was 1,024 qubits. Now we're going from 2,000 to 5,000. NSA owns one of these. Now they're doing contact tracing. And it's not just phone records and emails. Now it's going to be the cell phone application. Already admitted to having been developed for the iPhone and the Android, Apple and Google. It's already in place. I shared with you in Untitled magazine 2 years ago the origins of Google. DARPA, NSA, CIA, all funded Google. I shared with you the origins of Facebook. DARPA, NSA, CIA, Facebook. Amazon, angel investor of D-Wave quantum computing. Their business model, to sell you everything. We're in quarantine. What do you think happened to Amazon's business? Amazon bought Whole Foods, not because they wanted the grocery stores, but they wanted the data on their customers. Don't be afraid of any of this. Understand what's going on here. That takes the wind out of the sails of fear. Knowledge. This contact tracing is doing nothing but feeding the NSA. It increases what I've talked about over the years from computer programming, which is known as the granularity of data. I translate that as the density of the data. The more data that you have, the clearer the picture. The more data you have, the better the solution, the better the resolution, the better the accuracy of your conclusion. The greater the granularity, the density of the data, the more valid the patterns are. Your ability to recognize the patterns and to correctly identify those patterns. Contact tracing through this virus now is increasing the granularity of the data that they have on us. Not only do they have the dots and the lines, the nodes and the edges connecting people through telephone records and email records, now they literally are having connections established by who we happen to casually or purposefully encounter. Who are we associating with? You see, if there's not an email, if there's not old school technology, pager contact, if there's not a telephone call being made, and two people are coming in contact and they're even 6 feet away, social distancing, but they're communicating, NSA wants to know what they're communicating about. If they have their cell phones with them, NSA just eavesdrops right through the phone anyway. They don't need a phone call, and you guys know that. They just turn the microphone on and make it active. They do that with our computers. They do that with our smart televisions. But they're increasing the density of the data. They want to know more about our relationships with other people. That's what contact tracing is all about. Has nothing to do with have you exposed somebody or have you been exposed by coming in close contact with someone who is contagious. No, they want to know where we're going, who we're talking to. As soon as we sign off on this live stream, I'm going to post a link to this Wired Magazine article for you. I'll ask Doug Diamond, our webmaster, to post it in the archives at anthonypatch.com for patrons. I've shared with you the things that jumped off the page at me, of the things that we've talked about for so many years, that are all included in this. And again, this all coalesces to the mark of the beast, and the mark of the beast then communicating back out. Okay? The blockchain is just a big picture way of picturing the infrastructure. But the specific is what we were just reading in the article, and it is between the lines of that article known as the Sentient World Simulation. This is a real-time surveillance system of the entire planet, not just humans, but everything that's going on the planet in the simulation. When the mark of the beast is required for buying and selling, that is the control system, SWS. What builds out the infrastructure of the SWS is the blockchain system. And it was built out by appealing to human greed in the form of cryptocurrencies. Okay? All the pieces, all the components exist today for the revealing of the identity of the Antichrist being enthroned, if you will, and then the Antichrist requiring everyone to take the mark of the beast. That's how close we are. This is the days of Noah. We had the Chimera chipset from D-Wave, now we have the Pegasus chipset. Same thing as the days of Noah. Nothing new under the sun. As I said at the conclusion of my last live stream with you, this is sobering information. This is in our face. Satan is not hiding anything. It's all being published. It's all out there. It's there for people to pay attention, who are paying attention, for them to find, like you guys do. And you send to me. This one I happened to find on my own today. But like one of our patrons sent us the AT&T patent, which is where we're going to go on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to be talking about the single atom quantum development. It's a quantum engine and a quantum refrigerator. Basically, in a nutshell, it's a single atom quantum computer that can operate at room temperature, is what they're talking about. Okay? So this is the beginning of Quantum Week. We'll pick it up on Wednesday, Lord willing, with this patent, and we'll get into that much more deeply. But understand and underscore, when we talk quantum computers, we are talking AI. And when we're talking AI, we're talking mark of the beast. And as both quantum computing and artificial intelligence advance, and we hear the development timeline of vaccines, September, October, perhaps early next year, that gives us some sense of the season of the Antichrist. The season of the Antichrist. Okay? I had another article today that I was going to share with you regarding the vaccine that I posted before this live stream, and maybe we'll take a look at that on Wednesday. It's the test subjects, the further testing of the development of a vaccine that another patron sent to me today, this afternoon. Sobering information, but no reason to be fearful. Seek the knowledge through prayer, through the Holy Spirit. Seek the knowledge. God will share with you the information that He feels you can handle and that you need to remove the fear and to have the understanding of how to operate in today's world. The most powerful weapon system on the planet is prayer. Direct it at Satan and his minions as a weapon system. Turn it 180 degrees around and use prayer as a system to increase your knowledge. Okay? So with that, I want to say thank you and God bless you, and welcome to all the new patrons. Please email me your questions. I'm not going to take time tonight to take questions again. I kind of did the same thing in the last live stream. It's just, there's so much that I really want to share with you, and I just never have enough time. And 2 hours is just, not enough, but it's too long already. Thank you for putting up with my reading that entire article to you, but again, it's one of the seminal articles, one of the most revealing articles that I've read in a very long time. And I really felt that it was necessary to really parse it out and interject and explain to you and put it into proper context, the impact of it. Please go back and reread that article. I will post it in just a few minutes. Okay? So, God bless you all. Thank you for your friendship and your fellowship, and our prayers are always with you. Good night, and God bless.